They did not slam the door on the way out. They did not raise their voice. They did not make a scene or write a letter or deliver a dramatic final speech about everything that went wrong. One day, they were there, fully present, fully invested, fully in love. And then, one day, without warning, without explanation, without giving you a chance to fix it, they were gone. And the silence they left behind was louder than anything they ever said. If you are the person who left, you know the truth. It was not sudden. It was the slowest decision you have ever made. You spent months, maybe years, reaching for something that kept pulling away. You gave signals that nobody read. You said, "I am hurting in 15 different indirect ways," and no one heard a single one. And by the time you finally left, you were not angry. You were empty. The love was still there, but the hope was gone. And now the world calls you cold, calls you a runner, calls you someone who gives up. Because they only saw the ending. They did not see the 100 invisible goodbyes that came before the final one. If this is you, if you are the person who loved so deeply that leaving nearly destroyed you, but staying was destroying you faster, then you deserve to understand what drives this pattern. Because it is not about weakness. It is not about fear. It is about a very specific and deeply painful psychology. This is the psychology of people who love deeply but leave quietly. Let us establish something important. Leaving quietly does not mean you did not care. In many cases, it means you cared more than anyone realized. You cared so much that you absorbed mistreatment rather than cause conflict. You cared so much that you stayed far longer than you should have. And you cared so much that when you finally left, you did it in the way that would cause the least disruption, even at the cost of your own closure. Psychologists identify this pattern as a hallmark of what is sometimes called the quiet departure style. It is most commonly seen in individuals who score high on agreeableness and emotional sensitivity, but low on assertiveness. These individuals experience emotions at full intensity, but express needs at minimal volume. They feel everything. They say almost nothing. And when the gap between what they feel and what they express becomes unbearable, they withdraw rather than confront. Research published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that individuals who leave relationships without open conflict tend to have higher levels of empathy and a stronger fear of causing emotional pain to others. They are not avoiding confrontation because they are passive. They are avoiding it because they have an acute awareness of how much it will hurt the other person, and causing that kind of pain feels worse to them than absorbing their own. This is the paradox of the quiet leaver. They leave to protect themselves, but they leave quietly to protect the other person. And in the process, they deny themselves the catharsis of being heard, the validation of being understood, and the closure of being acknowledged. They sacrifice their own ending so that the other person's experience of the ending is less painful. And they do this automatically, without thinking, because their entire psychological architecture is built around minimizing the impact they have on others, even when that impact is justified. This pattern, like so many others, is born in childhood. And it begins with the experience of learning that expressing needs creates more problems than it solves. Children who become quiet leavers typically grew up in environments where emotional expression was met with dismissal, punishment, or guilt. They tried to tell their parent they were hurt, and they were told they were being dramatic. They tried to set a boundary, and they were told they were being selfish. They tried to say, "This is not working," and they were told they were ungrateful. Over time, these experiences teach the child a devastating lesson. Saying how you feel does not help. Or it makes things worse. The child learns that the safest response to emotional pain is silence. Not suppression, although that happens too, but strategic withdrawal. They learn to pull back rather than push forward, to retreat rather than confront, to leave rather than fight. And this lesson carries directly into adult relationships. The first time they feel hurt in a romantic relationship, they do not say, "I am hurt." They wait. They observe. They give the other person a chance to notice without being told. And when the other person does not notice, because most people cannot read minds, the quiet leaver files the incident away and adjusts their investment downward by 1 degree. This process repeats. Each unaddressed hurt reduces investment by another degree. Each unread signal adds another layer of resignation. And the person on the other side has no idea that the relationship is dying, because the quiet leaver gives no external indication that anything is wrong. By the time the quiet leaver decides to go, they have already grieved the relationship internally. The leaving is not the beginning of their grief, it is the end of it. They have already cried the tears, they have already processed the loss, they have already let go. And when they finally walk away, they appear calm, composed, and unaffected, which makes everyone think they never cared. But the truth is the opposite. They cared so much that they grieved silently for months while the other person slept soundly beside them, completely unaware that they were lying next to someone who was already gone. The quiet leaver follows a pattern that is so consistent it can be mapped in stages. Stage 1 is the initial investment. They fall deeply. They give generously. They love with an intensity that borders on devotion. They remember small details. They anticipate needs. They show love through action rather than words. And this stage can last months or years, during which the other person feels profoundly loved without ever fully understanding the depth of what they are receiving. Stage 2 is the first unspoken wound. Something happens. A dismissive comment. A forgotten anniversary. A moment where the quiet leaver reaches out emotionally and is met with indifference. They do not mention it. They process it internally. And they wait to see if the other person recognizes what happened. They rarely do. Stage 3 is the testing phase. The quiet leaver begins to give subtle signals. They share less. They initiate less. They create small distances to see if the other person will close them. This is not game playing. This is a desperate, wordless plea for attention. If the other person notices and responds, the quiet leaver recalibrates and reinvests. But if the signals go unnoticed, as they usually do, the withdrawal continues. Stage 4 is internal resignation. This is the turning point, and it happens entirely inside the quiet leaver's mind. They stop hoping. They stop expecting. They stop imagining a future with this person. They continue going through the motions of the relationship, but the emotional core has already left. They are present in body but absent in soul. And the transition is so seamless that the other person does not notice a thing. Stage 5 is the quiet departure. They leave, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes both. And the leaving is calm, almost surgical. There is no anger because the anger burned out months ago. There is no bargaining because they have already accepted the outcome. There is only a quiet, heavy certainty that they gave everything they had, and it was not enough to make this work. And the person left behind is blindsided. They say, "I had no idea." And the quiet leaver thinks, "I know. That is why I left. Because I gave you every signal I had, in every way I knew how, and none of them were loud enough for you to hear. And I could not bring myself to scream." The research on this pattern illuminates a psychological profile that is both admirable and deeply vulnerable. Attachment theory provides the most useful framework. Individuals who love deeply but leave quietly often display characteristics of what researchers call fearful-avoidant attachment, also known as disorganized attachment. This attachment style develops when a child's caregiver is simultaneously a source of comfort and a source of distress. The child learns to seek closeness but to fear it at the same time. In adult relationships, this translates to a push-pull dynamic that happens entirely internally. The fearful, avoidant person craves deep connection, but becomes physiologically overwhelmed by vulnerability. They love intensely but cannot sustain the emotional exposure that comes with expressing that love directly. And when the relationship reaches a critical level of emotional pain, They default to the avoidance strategy and withdraw. Yet research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that fearful-avoidant individuals report the highest levels of relationship distress among all attachment styles. They are more emotionally invested than dismissive avoidants, but less able to communicate their needs than those with secure attachment. They are, in many ways, the most loving and the most isolated. A study on conflict avoidance in relationships found that individuals who habitually avoid confrontation experience a phenomenon called emotional erosion, where unexpressed grievances slowly degrade the emotional foundation of the relationship. Each unspoken hurt removes a brick, and by the time the structure collapses, there is nothing left to rebuild with. Research on grief processing has also shown that quiet leavers experience a form of anticipatory grief, grieving the relationship while still in it. By the time they leave, they have already completed most of their mourning process, which is why they appear to recover quickly while the other person is just beginning to grieve. Let us be raw about what this actually feels like from the inside. It feels like lying next to someone you love and feeling completely alone. Like giving everything you have and watching it not be enough. Like reaching for their hand in the dark and feeling them pull away, not physically, but emotionally, and knowing that they do not even realize they did it. It feels like having 100 conversations in your head that you will never have out loud. Rehearsing the words you would say if you were brave enough. I am hurting. I need you to see me. I am leaving, and I want you to ask me to stay. But you never say them. Because you tried once, years ago, with someone else, or maybe with this same person, and the words did not land. And the silence afterward was worse than the pain that prompted the words. It feels like standing at a door, hand on the handle, knowing that what is on the other side is freedom and loneliness and grief and relief all at once, and knowing that no one on the other side of that door understands why you are leaving, and not being able to explain because the explanation would take years, and even then they would probably say, "Why did you not just tell me?" And the answer is the cruelest truth of all. You did tell them. In every unanswered text you did not follow up on. In every evening you spent in a different room. In every time you said, "I am fine," with a voice that clearly was not. You told them 1,000 times in a language they did not speak, and you left because you ran out of ways to say it. The world tells the quiet leaver that they should have communicated, that if they had just said something, things might have been different. And while communication is important, this advice misses a critical nuance. For many quiet leavers, they did communicate. They communicated constantly, through behavior, through withdrawal, through emotional signals that were clear to anyone who was paying attention. The problem was not a lack of communication, it was a lack of reception. They were broadcasting on a frequency that the other person was not tuned to hear. The world also places the burden of directness entirely on the quiet leaver. Pause without acknowledging that directness was never safe for them. You cannot tell someone who learned in childhood that speaking up leads to punishment to just speak up. That is not courage. That is re-traumatization. And the world frames quiet leaving as a failure of character rather than a failure of the relationship. The quiet leaver did not fail because they left without a fight. The relationship failed because it required a fight for basic emotional needs to be met, and the quiet leaver simply could not bring themselves to fight for something that should have been freely given. Leaving quietly is not cowardice. It is the final act of someone who tried everything except the one thing the world considers legitimate, making noise. If this is your pattern, here is the road forward. First, recognize that your quiet leaving is a protection mechanism, not a relationship strategy. It served you in childhood, where speaking up was genuinely unsafe. But in adult relationships, it denies both you and your partner the chance to repair. Second, practice what therapists call graduated disclosure. You do not need to suddenly become a person who shares everything. Start with small truths. That comment earlier bothered me. I felt unseen tonight. I need more from this. These micro-disclosures build the muscle of expression without the overwhelm of full confrontation. Third, learn to recognize the internal resignation point. The moment when something shifts inside you and hope dies. That is the moment to speak, not to withdraw. That is the critical intervention point where a conversation could save what silence will end. Fourth, choose partners who pursue. Not partners who are comfortable with your distance. Not partners who mistake your quietness for low maintenance. But partners who notice your withdrawal, who ask what is wrong, who close the gap before it becomes a gulf. And fifth, grieve the relationships you left without explanation. You owe yourself the acknowledgement that leaving was painful, even if you made it look painless. You loved those people, and you left because you did not know how to stay and be honest at the same time. That is not failure. That is a wound that deserves compassion. If you are the one who left quietly and no one ever asked you why, let this be the space where you finally say it. You left because you were tired, not of the person, but of being invisible to them. You left because your love language was action and theirs was words, and neither of you translated for the other. You left because you spent so long being strong that you forgot you were allowed to break. And you left because the only thing more painful than leaving someone you love is staying with someone who does not know how much you are hurting. You are not cold. You are not a runner. And you are not incapable of love. You are someone who loves at a depth that most people will never reach. And the tragedy of your life is that the people you loved most never fully knew the magnitude of what they had. But you will love again. And next time, you will try something terrifying and beautiful. You will open your mouth. You will say the words. And maybe, for the first time, someone will hear them. This is Unspoken Minds. And this time, you were heard.